meeting is being live streamed. By staying in this meeting, you consent to being live streamed. Anyone with access to the live stream can watch or share with others. That's a new message.
That's neat.
Yeah. So I wonder if everybody coming into the Zoom room will have to click got it. That may be a new consent requirement. Well, good evening, everybody. It is Monday, August 9th. This is our 3000th episode of the VBC Happy Hour. That's not true, but it is. I mean, we're probably up to about 200. I mean, well over 200, I would say by now. And tonight we have Dr. Cyril Wecht as our special guest, who this is kind of like one of those issues where this person is so interesting. We want to have him on. Thank goodness he's a veteran, so we could have the excuse to have him on. I don't know much about his Air Force service. I believe he was a forensic pathologist in the Air Force, and I think he had very interesting service. I think he moved around a lot, and but we're going to definitely have him talk about that. And I'm sure there will be a lot of other questions about what has made Cyril Wecht so famous, which are his autopsies and his forensic studies of deaths, controversial deaths, from John F. Kennedy to Elvis to John Benet Ramsey to George Floyd. I mean, it continues on remarkably.
I'm going to start this theme music and we can start letting everybody in.
Let's do it. Hey, good evening, everybody.
Listen, I trust everybody here is an ex-officer. I don't deign to talk to enlisted people. You know, I mean, I don't know if we were permitted to do that. Are we permitted to do that? I was permitted to date a WAF and eventually marry her. I sneaked that under the table.
No, hold it. That was against regulations, wasn't it? That's called fraternizing.
No, you know what? It wasn't. And I took her to the officers club, and no, my chief, of course, knew about it. It was nothing secret. We went to the officers club for dinner several times. No, it's funny. I never thought about that. And nobody ever said a word.
Nobody said a word. Boy, you couldn't get away with that today.
Is that right? You can't do that now?
Well, we should ask. We should ask and see what people have to say. You know what? But before we do that, maybe I should introduce myself. This is the BBC Happy Hour, and I'm Todd DiPastino, the Executive Director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. Welcome, everybody, to our 200 and something show of BBC Happy Hour since COVID-19. And tonight we have a special guest, Dr. Cyril Wecht, who has already talked a little bit about how he met his wife. And this is one of those cases where I was saying before we went live here, or before I think we brought people in to the Zoom room, this is one of those cases where this is, you know, the veterans were using the fact that Dr. Wecht served in the Air Force as an excuse to have him on the program because he's such a darn interesting person. And I know there's such an interesting life. And thank goodness he served in the Air Force, because it provides a good excuse for us to have him on. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to introduce Sean Hall, who's our Director of Programming. Good evening, Sean. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. And we have Ellie DiPastino in Chicago. She's engineering the program. And we have illustrious people here in the audience. I'm very happy and look forward to getting to several of you before we get to Dr. Wecht's story. But first, Sean, we have a new Scuttlebutt podcast released today. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Of course. This is the first episode of season 4. We were joined by Lori Huertas, who is not a veteran herself, but her son told her, I'm going to go join the Army. And that created a seismic shift in her life, where she decided that she was going to pretty much become a military family champion. She has her hands in a lot of pots and a lot of spinning plates, and she is a champion also of reading for military children. Works with caribou.com. I'd say look them up if you can. They have a ton of military books on their site that people can record themselves reading and then send them to their kids if they're on active duty. She wrote a book herself that she just published about 2 weeks ago. She pretty much is winning Mom of the Year in my book, other than my wife. So, we'll have that. But Lori Huertas, I'm hoping to have her back on and come back on with Sesame Street. She's been doing a lot of work with them. It's incredible, her energy. So if you get a chance, check it out at veteransbreakfastclub.org/scuttlebutt, which Ellie just put in the chat.
And I think Jeremy Harbaugh is probably Dad of the Year. I can see he has 2 kids in his lap right now. Little Jeremy, and we're going to get to him in a second. And but for those of you who are a little older, caribou.com, and I'm, my kids aren't as young as Jeremy's anymore. And so I don't quite know what that is, but I think it's a children's reading app. Is that what it is?
Yes, I'm gonna put the link here in the chat for anyone to go check it out. If you are a veteran, or active military, a membership with them is free. They are big supporters of military and veteran families. And I'd say you can go on there. You can easily flip through a book. Someone could be on there with you, like on Zoom like this, and you could read the book to your child or your grandchild, great-grandchild. It's a wonderful service. Looking forward to connecting with them more as I continue to do Scuttlebutts.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. And also I want to let people know we have another veteran story with Pete Mecca coming up on Thursday night at 7 here in this same Zoom room. And this will be a conversation with Jim Nomad Lawrence,
Thank you, sir.
who, boy, I mean, he soloed when he was 16 years old. He was one of the last Navy aviators to go through to get his wings without a college degree. He ended up putting, 30 years in the military and flew the equivalent, and I did the math, he logged, I should say, as a pilot over the course of his life, 5 years in the air as a pilot, 5 years, 45,000 hours or something like that, something incredible. So we're going to have him on, and that's Thursday night at 7 with Pete Mecca. I hope you could join us. And we also tonight have Colonel Ed Jackson, who just retired this year after 26.5 years of service as a pilot also, I believe a C-130 pilot. And he is now very much involved with a wonderful nonprofit called Folds of Honor. Colonel Jackson, there you are. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Ty? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, and so you flew that wonderful C-130 airplane for decades, huh?
Yeah, a little background. I was at the 9/11 Air Wing here in Pittsburgh. I started in the C-130 in Savannah, Georgia, and in the 90s. And I got the opportunity when Bosnia and Kosovo, I was doing deployments over there, was hot and heavy. We were going over there a lot, and I got the opportunity to fly with some of these pit guys, and they said, "Hey, man, you come to our squadron, we'll give you a full-time job." So I was the Air Reserve technician for about 12 years there at the squadron. I spent 26.5 years in the Air Force Reserve. I retired February 12th. And at the end of my career, I was lucky enough, we got another major weapon system. We got the C-17 out there at Pittsburgh. So I went to Altus, this time I took the whole family. I was like, if I'm going and I can take it, we're going together. So I took the whole family to Oklahoma, and the boys played hockey in Oklahoma. And I tell you, those pit boys were the best out there. So we had a great experience. So that's kind of my background. Then retired February 12th. Flew the C-17 just under 2 years.
C-17 for just under 2 years, and that is now the main. I think there are 8 of them now. I just saw Colonel Robinson, the commander of the 9/11 Airlift Wing, the other night. There are 8 of them now at the 9/11th. Yep. And I mean, their cargo capacity is just way more than what the C-130 fleet had. And the mission was strategic airlift, where the C-130 was tactical airlift. Right.
Basically, the 130 would do a lot of austere stuff. The C-17 is pretty much take off and land around the world to get things where they need to go.
Yes. And I want you, Ed, if you can, look at Ben Wright. If you can see him on this Zoom grid here, you can see he has C-130s lined up behind him. He's a fellow C-130 pilot, retired, fellow lieutenant colonel. But you just retired this year. And I should tell you, I'm not a veteran. But one thing I've learned from veterans, working with them with the Veterans Breakfast Club for 13 years, was that it's very difficult. It can be very difficult to separate from the military. The more years you put in it, the harder it is to separate, to become a civilian again, or maybe even a civilian kind of for the first time as an adult. Have you found it difficult, or did you anticipate that difficulty, and that's how you got involved with Folds of Honor?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's exactly why I got involved with Folds of Honor. I coming up on retirement, and I'm sure a lot of the men and women that are here on this Zoom with us have the same experiences. But I knew it was time to go. Being a C-130 pilot, it's kind of like a bell curve. You start as lieutenant and you're not very good, not very good. Then you get really, 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 really good. And as you make rank, you get not very good, not very good. So I knew my time was measured, and I was a C-130 guy. The C-17 just wasn't for me. I got to fly it. I was grateful that I got to fly it. It was just not a mission that I enjoyed as much. So I knew I was getting there to the end of my career, and I was just looking to continue that, and I started looking at different charities. And at the time that I was looking, Folds of Honor didn't have a chapter here in Western PA. And so I started making some phone calls. Of course, they told me, hey, Mike Pathologist established a chapter. So I was able to get with Mike. We created a military committee with all the forces. We have a representative from each force on the military committee. And then just about 2 weeks ago, Mike asked me to join the board of directors. So I'm now on one of the board of directors for the Western PA chapter.
So in other words, you kind of lined up this mission for yourself post service, to keep on serving and do something meaningful for the military community. Can you talk a little bit about what Folds of Honor does?
I got a short video. I don't know how much time we got. It's a little less than 3 minutes. I can share my screen. That speaks for the charity a lot better than I could. Would you mind if I share my screen and show everybody?
You know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we put the video in the link? We could put a link to the video, and I believe the video is on the website.
Yep.
And just have you talk a little bit about what it does.
Yeah, so Folds of Honor is a charity that Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney, Major Rooney at the time, which is great for the Pittsburgh folks because he's a Rooney with the little Steelers imprints in there. But he started the charity back in 2007. He was flying home. He was F-16. He's an F-16 reservist, and he was flying home from an Iraq deployment. And basically, there was a family there that was taking home one of our fallen heroes, and it just hit him that their young 4-year-old son, who was out on the tarmac to receive his dad, was going to be all alone. And he said, "You know what? I need to do something about that." So he was Lieutenant Colonel Rooney became dedicated to promoting and funding scholarships for fallen soldiers, disabled soldiers, and their families. So that's what we do, and it's a great cause.
And it's a great cause, and it's a pretty straightforward one, easy to explain and easy to support. Go to foldsofhonor.org. Wonderful work. And so you really helped to create the Pittsburgh chapter of Folds of Honor, or you did create it. You're the
Well, so, I was getting towards the end of my career and just wanted to stay engaged. So when I talked to Mike, I said, hey, I'm military. I can get in those circles and really reach out to people. I mentioned the Veterans Club. This is kind of, I wanted to come in person and introduce myself and see everybody and meet everybody. And I'm really looking forward to doing that because that'll happen. But, one of my projects was to get out to the veterans, because even at my own base, when I started to talk about Folds of Honor, I was really surprised how many people didn't know about it. It's a pretty popular, it's been highlighted on Fox News. Lieutenant Colonel Rooney has a show on Fox Nation. So I thought, a lot of people would know about this, and they really didn't. So I wanted to just get the word out, especially in military circles. Like, we have a 3-on-3 basketball tournament coming up. I'm putting together next summer a 3-on-3 hockey for the kids, just all for the charity. So it's not just about donating, it's about volunteering. I'd love to see the military engaged out there. As soon as I put it around my base and started talking, I had guys, my first sergeant, he joined the military committee immediately. Those guys are gung-ho chargers. So we're just trying to get the word out and say, hey, veterans, these are, not only is it a great charity, it's a great to come hang out. They love to see the veterans there at these events, hang out, shake a hand. 93-7's got a basketball team on the 3-on-3. They're going to play the military team. They just really, really enjoy that the veterans come out. So I'm going to on the chat, I'm going to put my email, because what we have is if anybody feels like volunteering or wants to just participate in these things, they can email me. I'll put it on the chat here shortly. And I can get everybody hooked up. It's just great, even just to have a presence. If a few veterans want to show up, it's actually, these events are great days. We just did one at Top Golf. I called it one of the funnest days of my life. I mean, it's just great people for a great cause, you know, and they love having the veterans out there participating, and it's just a great time.
Well, okay, three things, Ed. Number one, next time, anytime that there's a Folds of Honor event that you want to get the word out about, you know, a way that people could support your mission, let us know and we'll get the word out. You could come on the program, announce it. We could share it on social media. You have my email. Number two, would love to have you come back here and share some of your stories of service. And number three, since you are in the Pittsburgh area, you've got to come to one of our live events, our in-person events, I should say, that we have coming up this fall. And I will definitely put you on the spot and have you wax poetic about the C-130. All right.
I would love to do that. I appreciate everybody's time today. It's great to be here.
It's great. It's great to have you. Great to have you.
Like you said, I do want to answer your question. You asked if I missed it, and that was one of my biggest fears. You know, retirement. I was going to miss it. But you know what? Yeah, you know, I learned very quickly. It's a young man's game. So, and I have a 13 and 12-year-old. So having all the time with them, you know, I look back and I'm not wanting for anything, man. I had a great career and I had a great time. So.
Yeah, believe me, Ed, and those kids grow up and then they become like Ellie. So, you know, you enjoy them while you can. You know?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I do want to also introduce another two new people who are joined our program. It's Jeff Kelly and Jeremy Harbaugh, and they are with Wounded Heroes Hunting Camp. Jeremy and Jeff, Jeremy, I know, is a veteran. Jeremy, you're a Marine, correct?
That is correct, Todd.
Okay. Who gave you the advice to join the Marine Corps?
That was tough advice. I ended up playing on the lightweight football team at the Naval Academy called Sprint Football, used to be called Lightweights. And our head coach was a major in the Marine Corps, infantry officer, and he sucked me in.
He sucked you in. You know, I met a 16-year-old girl this weekend who was going to wanted to join the military, and she had a grandfather and an uncle who were pushing her to join the Marines. I leaned over and I said, "Join the Air Force." Join the Air Force.
Best commissaries there is.
But you are the founder of this organization of Wounded Heroes Hunting Camp. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So graduated from the Naval Academy in 2011, and I was selected to attend graduate school. Ended up going to Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business and got to pursue my MBA. And while I was in business school, I was volunteering with a nonprofit called Simplify Odyssey. They have a Boy Scout camp that they bought. I can't remember where at, but it's somewhere east of Pittsburgh. And Major General Jones ran the program. And I got to connect with the wounded vets that were at that program, helping them do a 2-week transition, trying to figure out what they wanted to do in life. And the biggest takeaway that I got out of talking with those vets was that there's over 50,000 wounded vets in the country, at least at the time. But they're all spread out. They don't have that. They're missing that sense of brotherhood, being able to get, back out in the outdoors, whether it's on field exercises or somehow to simulate that. And I went back, and so I was getting my MBA. I was getting really interested in entrepreneurship, but I still had a full active duty career ahead of me, which still active duty to this day. And I wanted to figure out, how can I take what I'm learning in business school and apply it in a manner that's going to give back to the wounded combat veterans and what they're struggling with. And so that's where I kind of got the idea to start the Wounded Heroes Hunting Camp. And our mission is to help wounded combat veterans heal. And we use the outdoors as a way to facilitate it, whether it's hunting trips, fishing events. But ultimately, it's much more than just, going out and shooting guns and catching fish. It's about getting these wounded veterans together in the outdoors so that they can connect. One thing that we really strive to do is, it's not about numbers. Everybody is a person with a face, and really making them feel like they're a part of our family. It's not a one time and done. We stay connected with the heroes, whether it's on Facebook, and essentially create this family kind of atmosphere for them. If a veteran's struggling, reaching out to them through the support network. And it's unbelievable to look on Facebook and see all the heroes that connect with each other post-event, the conversations that they're continuing to have. And then it's definitely not uncommon when one's having, struggling with life, and they have a post that's kind of showing some signs of risk involved. Other heroes are jumping in, reaching out to that hero, as well as alerting us and our staff so that we can go out and provide them the support. Sometimes that's getting that hero on another event. Common statistic that I'm sure everybody on this group knows, on average, 22 veterans commit suicide a day. I don't have any statistics on the number of veterans that we have saved their lives, but I'm confident there's multiple days that our organization has helped prevent number 23 from happening. So Todd, I really appreciate you inviting us on here.
And these are not little adventures. These are pretty serious adventures all over the country. You have an antelope hunt coming up in Lincoln City, New Mexico, where actually my brother lived for a while. You have an Oregon elk hunt. I mean, you guys go all over the country and do a lot of different kind of adventures. And I guess I have two questions for you. If you are a veteran, or a veteran who wants to go on one of these adventures, somebody who could really benefit from this, how do you get them involved? How do you apply?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Go to our website, www.whhc.org. And on the top there is a apply for an adventure tab that you can click on. When you click on that tab, there's information that you can fill out, pretty much name where you served, what conflicts you served in. And then at the very bottom, we require two things to be attached. And one is your DD 214 that proves that you served in combat. That's one thing that we do require for our promise to our donors, is that we're finding combat veterans. And then the second thing is either a Purple Heart citation to prove that you were injured, or the VA award letter. We don't need any information other than the fact that you actually was awarded disability by the VA. We don't need to know what your injuries are. It does help, especially with limitations. But go and fill all that out. You can fill it out for somebody else as well. The referrals are always usually better because someone recognizes that need and getting that hero that need.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine that the referrals are really important for you. And again, you could have either a citation for a Purple Heart or a VA disability rating letter, one or the other. It doesn't have to be a Purple Heart. That's absolutely. And then the second question is, if I want to support your organization, how do I do it? I get obviously donations. You can go to the website and donate. Other ways to support it?
Absolutely. There is the Trap Shoot for Heroes coming up. It's going to be the 10th annual. It's an event that we hold annually in Warrendale, Pennsylvania. Jeff Kelly is actually runs the event, and if he's on here, I'd love to let him talk a little bit more about it.
Let's have him talk. Hey Jeff, how are you? Jeff, here, I'm going to ask you to unmute. And I'm also going to ask you if you're a veteran.
Jeff's a dinosaur.
My father, he was a World War II aircraft carrier vet, and my brother was also a vet, but I did not go into the military. This is my give back. I had a brother-in-law that actually was killed in Vietnam War. So this is my connection. Wounded Heroes Hunting Camp, we do this trap shoot. That's our biggest fundraiser of the year. It's held at Northside Sportsman's Club. They're nice enough to let us use their facility there. And 2 years ago when we had the shoot, we had over 70 shooters there. This year, I hope to have 100. So far, it's a slow sign up, I think, because of COVID again.
Sure.
But hopefully, I've talked to a lot of people. I've sent out probably 200 emails, and looking for corporate sponsors. I have a business in Wexford. This is my give back to the vets. I actually purchased a farm up by Brookville this year that we're going to start doing Pennsylvania hunts, a few more a year.
This is wonderful. So you could go to whhc.org and register for the shoot. I imagine they could also probably contact you through the website to sponsor this event. And this is an event that is on September 25th. So we still have a month and a half to go. And Jeff, if you have like a flyer or something you want us to, or just something you want us to post on Facebook, let us know that, and we could also get the word out on our social media.
Okay, I think I sent your daughter one last week, but
Okay, yeah.
I can send another one if you need it.
Oh, she got it. Believe me, she's on top of things. I am not, but she is. So if you send it to her, then yeah, then we've posted it, and you can see it's a full day of shooting and remarks and lunch, followed by lunch and awards. So yeah, go to whhc.org and sign up for it. Wonderful. Thank you, John or Jeffrey, and thank you very much, Jeremy, for coming and joining us. And you're both welcome to come anytime. Jeremy, if you ever want to come and share stories of your service as a Marine officer, we'd love to have you.
Thanks, Todd. I got to give a shout out to all the C-130 pilots on here. I'm a AV-8B Harrier pilot. Appreciate every time they've given me fuel. Unfortunately, we don't have any coffee makers in our cockpit.
Oh man, you knew that was coming. You knew that was coming. All right. Hey, all right. Ken Kazak, you're here, correct? Ken.
I am here, Todd.
All right. Hey, Ken, you have an event coming up sooner than next month. You have an event coming up on Sunday, August 15th. But before you talk about that event, I'm going to share a picture. All right. And I'm going to have people, you cannot answer this question, Ken, but I want others to answer this question. Who is this person on the left? Just shout it out.
Clemente.
Roberto Clemente was a Marine.
Roberto.
Roberto Clemente was a Marine. And I've met a few people who were inspired to join the Marine Corps because of him, including Joe Sorelli, who was recently passed member here of the Veterans Breakfast Club. He was a ball boy for the Pirates in the 1960s or 1950s, 50s, early 60s. So the only reason he joined the Marine Corps was because he worshiped Roberto Clemente. And Clemente was a good Marine. He was not an expert marksman, but man, he came really, really close. And he was one of those guys who would just put in the hours on the rifle range because he was so driven and determined to be excellent on the rifle range like he was on the baseball field. Here he is as a baseball player. And I bring that up, Ken, because your event here on Sunday, August 15th, is going to end at the Roberto Clemente Museum downtown, correct?
That's correct. So I ride in the Hill District all the time. I'm a hill climber. And every year we do a tour of sites in the Hill District connected to August Wilson, the movie Fences. And I happen to know the house that Roberto Clemente lived in from 1955 to 1964. And we stopped by the house. And then this year, Dwayne at the Clemente Museum is giving us access for 2 hours. So the point is, Todd, that people can come into the museum. You don't have to show up on your bicycle. You can just come there. And if you've never seen it, it is an amazing venue. You can't imagine all the items that Dwayne Reeder has acquired from the Clemente estate and the Clemente family.
So that ride is going to be Sunday, August 15th at 10 a.m. You're going to meet at Hellman Plaza across from Hill House in the Hill District. You're going to go and do a tour of the Hill District area and then down to downtown at the Roberto Clemente Museum. I do see here, I would join you on that bike ride, Ken, but I do see that there's no whining allowed.
Yes.
I'd not be.
That's a long story, but people are complaining about too many hills, and I kept saying it's the Hill District, and but this is a different ride. I flattened the hills out. It's more sights. I'll tell you one. This is totally not military or baseball related, but we're stopping by the House of Art Blakey, and I know the name. I didn't know how significant Art Blakey was. He was phenomenal. I've been listening to Art Blakey jazz music for the last 2 weeks, and I'll continue to do so.
Wonderful. That is so great. There's a lot of history in the Hill District. And we are, I promise, going to get to Dr. Cyril Wecht very soon. But before we do, I do want to say hello to our friend in Lafayette or near Lafayette, Louisiana, Connor Ritchie, 16 years old. Hello, Connor. How are you?
How do I unmute you? Don't leave me then.
You are unmuted, Dr. Wecht. I'll mute you back up a little bit here. Okay, there we go. Hello, Connor. Connor Ritchie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
I bet it's hotter and humider in Pittsburgh right now than it is in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Oh yeah, it's getting up there.
Up there.
It feels like 100 degrees outside.
Connor and I have been emailing back and forth, and I'm just so intrigued by the number of interviews that 16-year-old Connor Ritchie has done of World War II veterans over the past several months. And Connor, you make me look like a piker in terms of the interviews that I've done with veterans. I was so impressed to hear that you interviewed a 104-year-old World War II veteran, right? I'm going to show his picture here. Major Wooten.
Yes, that's his name, correct.
His name is Major Lee Wooten, and here he is. And you interviewed him over the phone?
Well, it was on FaceTime because, he's very, very hard of hearing and he's not hearing on the phone real well. So I think it's best to do FaceTime at this point. But yeah, this is a picture of him on the right. You could see this young man right here. He had 3 brothers that served besides him, all infantry. He was a transportation railway battalion, means that he was responsible for the German railroad cars that were bombed by the Germans, and he landed on Utah Beach on D-Day. And 3 of his brothers, his oldest brother had been in 5 major battles, including the Battle of the Bulge, the last German offensive in the Ardennes, and he had another brother that was in the Pacific and the other brother that was in Italy and unfortunately did not make it home.
Didn't make it home. And he was in the news recently. You might remember seeing him on the news because this certainly was a big story. He's 104 years old and came down with COVID. Very bad case. Put him in the hospital and he survived.
Well, he's a tough cookie, pretty much.
He's a tough cookie, that's right.
He's a farm boy from Chilton County, Alabama. And basically what he does at 104 years of age, I think it's the good genes that he's lived so long. I mean, he's outlived his mother about 8 years, and his dad died early from brain aneurysm when he was about 12, 13 years old. So he had to quit. So he had a challenge is to quit school very early when he was 12 or 13 and had to help feed the family because his mother was raising 12 of his children, and his youngest brother was in the womb when their father died. So he and his younger brother are the last alive.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Here's another tough cookie that you interviewed recently. And I love this picture because he was a member of the 101st Airborne Division in World War II. Of course, many of those soldiers grew that crazy haircut, the Mohawk haircut, and here he is. He had just did it recently in his 90s. You interviewed Guy Whidden, who's very much of a legend, the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, so much of a legend that there's these action figures of him that you can buy. How did you track him down and talk to him?
Well, first of all, I'm actually working on him because the founder of Walk Among Heroes, Jeff Wells, is traveling to DC for me to FaceTime him. I didn't interview him yet, but
okay,
he's a very, very famous man, 98 years old. And he's the one that watched 3 of his best friends. His whole squad was killed. There was 4 men and 3 were killed instantly. And he walked out alive with a very severely, really torn up leg and was sent to the hospital for a while and couldn't even make it to Bastogne because of that. So another cool guy.
And then a final cool guy, and this is a guy that we're going to get on our program and schedule him for a VBC happy hour, is Jake Larson, otherwise known as Papa Jake. His granddaughter, a very devoted granddaughter, Michaela Larson, curates a TikTok account called Storytime with Papa Jake. Many of them are also on YouTube. They are absolutely mesmerizing, these TikToks are. I mean, this man has a memory at age 98 of just day-to-day life growing up on a farm in Minnesota, of, you know, landing on Omaha Beach on D-Day with the 1st Infantry Division, of fighting in the Battle of the Bulge, losing his rifle. I mean, it's just, it's absolutely wonderful. And you've talked to him, right, Jake Larson?
Oh yes. He's a very, very nice guy and a very, very sharp memory at 98 years old. I mean, that's correct. He was born in Minnesota and on a very dirt poor farm with 7 siblings that were, most of them are older than him, but he's the only one left out of 8 children now. And quite a star. He's a TikTok fan. Did you read his there was a video it's very, very emotional that his wife, Mind Heritage, sent his wife's picture alive, and that teared him up hard because he was very, very close to his wife and especially to his buddies because they're all gone. Feel so bad for the man because very close family, very good guy.
Yes, and you know, we're proud at the Veterans Breakfast Club that 1 or 2 or 3 of our TikToks went viral with over 1 million views. This TikTok that I'll share with you now got almost 20 million views. 20 million. I mean, one of the most viral TikToks ever. I'll share it with you right now because I do find it so moving. His granddaughter was able to animate a photo of Jake's deceased wife, Lola, and show it to him. And he was astounded. Here it is.
God. Holy smokes. She's alive.
Yeah, it brings the picture to life.
Look at that smile. Oh, God.
That's your Lola. Isn't it amazing that technology?
I can't believe it. Oh.
Oh.
It's her.
Yeah, it's like she's here.
This past November 23rd, we would have been married 75 years. And I still love her.
I love her too.
God.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful video there. And the other one I love, and I thought I would just share it, is and again, I'm gonna call Michaela and we're gonna arrange to have him on our VBC happy hour. I want to share with you the one that I just love, and it's how he joined the Minnesota National Guard when he was younger than you, Connor.
Just 1 year, 15 years old, fresh out of a farm from Hope, Minnesota. Yeah.
You're such a slacker, Connor. Why aren't you in the, you know, you're 16, you should be in the Marine Corps. I'm kidding.
Well,
don't join the
I don't
Marines.
know about that because you have to be 18 to join the military, not 16.
Yeah, don't join at 16. Don't join anything at 16. But here is him sharing the story of joining the Minnesota National Guard when he, I want to make sure that I'm sharing my sound also. Okay. Minnesota National Guard at age 15 with his cousin. Oh, you can't hear it. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to redo it. That sometimes happens. Not quite sure. There we go. Okay. Do it once again. Here we go. This should work. No. What the heck?
I joined the National Guard.
All right. Can you hear now?
Age 15. And
Yes.
And my cousin Chick, we started walking around Owatonna, no money. And we walked by the Roxy Theater. Saturday matinee, Gene Autry, America's favorite cowboy. 10 cents. Between us, we couldn't come up with a penny. He says, Jake, let's join the National Guard. Chick, join the National Guard. You have to be 18. We're 15. He says, look, let's go down to the armory. When they ask you how old you are, you look them right in the eye and say, 18, sir. I said, they'll never go for that. Is what can they do? Kick us out? So we walked to the armory, went into the office there. There was a big captain sitting at his desk. He looked up at us and he said, what can I do for you young men? A bulb came on in my head and says, look, he's calling us men. There's a chance. I said, sir, we'd like to join the National Guard. And I'm looking at him, thinking 18. Looks at me and he says, what year were you born? Wow, wait a minute. But I was born in 1922. Take away 3 is 1919. And I said, 1919, sir. He says, sign right here. And of course, Chick followed with 1919. We got in, and every Monday night we would go to the armory. We got in, and every Monday night we would go to the armory. We learned to drill, the order of arms, how you handle your rifle. It's amazing. We became soldiers. The National Guard paid us $1 every Monday night. That was 2 hours of drilling. They paid by check every 3 months. So every 3 months we get $12. And we were dressed in soldier uniforms, so we could stop into Steve's pool room, sit at a table and order a pitcher of beer for 25 cents.
That is the greatest.
That is great.
I love that. So Connor,
This is a real B&H.
oh,
customer
hey,
service.
yes, Connor, you were going to say something?
Yeah. I've told you about your reaction that you said that he's the best storyteller, and he says, oh, I'm just a farm boy from Minnesota.
Well, we're going to have you and Jake Larson on again, and then we're also going to have you and Henry Shepke and Trey Bergman, who's 14 years old, 15 years old, and we're going to have you on and have the kids run a VBC happy hour coming up here probably early September. All right. Yes, Connor.
Yeah. And also, if the viewers who are in this program have any questions about my interviews, I can answer it as best I can. But before I mute this button, I thank all the veterans here for their service and their sacrifice.
You're the greatest, Connor. Thank you so much thank you for joining us and for listening to these stories. I think our veterans love the idea that that young people are listening and care about their experiences, and that the wisdom that they have to share is being handed down to younger generations. You, and I'll count Sean and Ellie in that also. Finally, thank you. We are on to Dr. Cyril Wecht. Dr. Wecht, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for listening to these conversations here before you. I want to tell you this. When I was 12 years old, I cared about one thing in life, and that was sports. That's all I really cared about. I love to play them. I love to watch them. I love to keep track of them. All I cared was sports. My mom got really concerned that I was going to amount to a big nothing in life. And so she sat me down and said, you have all the wrong role models. They shouldn't be these sports heroes. Your role model should be Dr. Cyril Wecht. And I looked at her and said, who the heck is Dr. Cyril Wecht? And she said, he's a lawyer. She was my Polish mother. He's a lawyer and a doctor. That's what you should aspire to. And every time I hear your name, Dr. Wecht, I think of that. I think of that advice. And maybe if I had another lifetime, I might be able to achieve half of what you've achieved. Your new memoir you call yourself the world's most controversial forensic pathologist, but I would think that you're probably the world's most famous forensic pathologist. And I'm going to share the book cover here. You, from what I've heard, is it true, Dr. Wecht, this first question, have you done 21,000 autopsies in your career? I'm going to ask you to unmute here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I have done about 21,000 autopsies, and I have reviewed, supervised, signed off on about 41,000 others. And that goes back to the beginning of my residency in pathology at the University Veterans Administration Hospital here in Pittsburgh in 1957. 2 years there, and then 2 years in the Air Force, and then 5th year of forensic pathology training at the medical examiner's office in Baltimore, Maryland, and then back to Pittsburgh in the summer of '62, where I have been practicing up until this time. I just did 3 autopsies yesterday, and we got 4 already lined up for tomorrow.
How old are you, sir?
90.
90 years old. You're still working.
Yeah, I do consultations and autopsies, and I'm still working. My wife and I go in to the office every day.
And some of these investigations and autopsies are, people we've heard of, like President John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Elvis Presley, John Benet Ramsey, right down to, as you say, things that you're still doing today, George Floyd, reviewing that, that incident.
Yes.
I mean, have you done, do you think that, is there a forensic pathologist who has done more research and autopsies than you in the world?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Excuse me. I don't keep track. Some of my colleagues are now retired or partially retired, and they were very busy. I really haven't kept up with the younger generation very much, although my colleague, she is much younger. She came on board about 4 years ago, and she's an excellent forensic pathologist. But I have had the opportunity to be involved in these cases in one way or another, directly with the autopsy, the repeat autopsy, a review of the autopsy, governmental consultations, families, private attorneys, news media. They come about in different ways. It all started with the JFK assassination, and when I gave a paper at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences in February of 1965. And I've been with that to the present time. And I'm chairman of a national organization, Committee Against Political Assassinations, CAPA. We meet annually. We'll have our meeting commemorating that anniversary in November in Dallas. We do that every year. And then Robert F. Kennedy, I was a consultant to Dr. Tom Noguchi, my good friend, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner, and then Mary Jo Kopechne involving Ted Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and on, as you mentioned, Sonny Von Bulow and Chandra Levy, and the shootout in Wichita Falls, Texas, and involving multiple deaths. And then moving ahead into O.J. Simpson and John Benet Ramsey, and on, and recently did a lot of commenting on the case of George Floyd in Minneapolis. In fact, I just spoke today something that you'll find very interesting. Colin Kaepernick, the veteran football player who, that story, he refused to stand up. Anyway, that foundation and another big foundation, they have millions of dollars. They are going to spend that money and make available second autopsies in all police-related deaths to attorneys and families who want those, and they will make those available at no cost at all. And I've been asked to head that up from the medical standpoint. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And the experiences have been wonderful. And I had those 2 great years at Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama. I was fortunate. I had a wonderful chief. And we had about 27 air bases that sent their materials to us. And we worked hard, but enjoyed it. And I had the wonderful opportunity on weekends with the navigators and pilots who were in class all week. That was the home of the War College and the Command and Staff School and Squadron Officer School, SOS. And they had to get their flying hours in. So you went down there about Friday at lunchtime and you signed up, and I flew all over the place. Bermuda, I visited friends and colleagues of mine who were in the military in Nellis Air Force Base and Nevada and Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia. I was all over the place. And I got 2 free hops to Europe for my furloughs. And then most importantly, as I mentioned before, I met my wife who had joined UAF. She spoke about 7, 8 languages. They told her she could work as a translator. I don't know, they were lying or it didn't work out for whatever reason.
The military lied to her.
Well,
That would be a first. That would be a first.
She would work, yeah. Anyway, she was born in Norway and she lived the first 6 years under Nazi rule and came here after World War II. And we'll be married 60 years now in October. And so I really liked that with my Air Force tour. And had some wonderful lectures and presentations at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in Washington, D.C., no longer extant, on the grounds of the Walter Reed. And I've had the opportunity to give lectures at the FBI Academy there and various other places. So that's the story.
Dr. Wecht, I've been working with veterans for 13 years now, and from what I've heard, probably the most traumatic job you could have might be graves registration in the military. And I'm thinking about you having conducted 21,000 autopsies, people who are, die way too young, violently, some of them children. How do you deal with the trauma of these cases that are just so powerful and disturbing?
I never lose my sensitivity. I'm always aware of what that death means to family and friends and so on. It's an important part of what I do, and I have never become immune or impervious or insensitive and unconcerned about these cases. But what the forensic pathologist does in terms of what is needed in the civil and criminal justice systems is very, very important. And it's so exciting. You work with judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys in criminal cases, plaintiff and defense attorneys in civil cases, workers' compensation. You're dealing with families. When I think of the things that I've done, the coal miners, widows that I helped get benefits for the pneumoconiosis, co-workers disease over the years, and the cases in which I've testified, I all over the place, and I've testified in half a dozen different countries, and I've done autopsies in different places too, Taiwan and Israel and Brazil and Canada and a few other places. They've been very, very exciting. And some other cases that would have been, might have been, but didn't pan out for one reason or another. I remember getting a call from a colleague of mine up in Michigan. They were going to dig up Jimmy Hoffa. And he said, pack your bag and come on up here tomorrow. And of course, it turned out to be a ruse. Jimmy Hoffa, I don't know if they ever really found him. I don't think so.
I don't think so. No, I don't think they did. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this line of work? Tell us a little bit about your childhood. You grew up here in Western Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, my father is from Lithuania, my mother from Russia, Kiev, now Ukraine. And I grew up, you're talking about the Hill District. I grew up 1 year in Greene County, Bobtown, coal mining town, 7 years in McKees Rocks, and then we moved to the Lower Hill District by the Mercy Hospital. And they were talking about the Hill District, and I remember we went up there to play ball at the Iron Kaufman Settlement. And they were talking about where the different people lived and the August Wilson Center and so on. I just recently worked with them too. They did a film called Cyril, and And it was done by the August Wilson people. So anyway, my father from the old country always told me I was going to be a doctor. That's what every Jewish parent wanted their son to be, a doctor. So it never occurred to me something other than being a doctor and pre-med at Pitt. And I was very active on campus. I don't know, people thought I was pre-law, but I went into medical school. And then my third year, I contacted the AMA and was put in touch with the major medical legal person in the country, went to meet with him at a national conference in New York, and he told me exactly what was involved somewhat, and I made up my mind then. And what I did was quite interesting. After my internship at St. Francis General Hospital, I was a full-time law student at Pitt Law School and a full-time resident in pathology at the University VA Hospital. I did that simultaneously for 2 years. I wanted the third year so I could finish law school. The Air Force, the military, which had deferred me through college and medical school and internship, and for a couple of years under the Berry program, allowing people to get training in specialties. They didn't give a damn. They felt I could function as a pathologist, and they were right, and I did. But I caught a real break, and I got credit for my 2 years at the Maxwell Air Force Base because of the tremendous amount of work that we did. And then I did my forensic path and third year of law school in Baltimore, Maryland, and returned to Pittsburgh, as I said, in the summer of '62. So that's the story, and I'm still doing these autopsies and consultations all over the place. Consultations. I had one a few weeks ago from Australia. They could be from anywhere.
That's absolutely stunning to hear that you were in law school and residency at the same time. I want to invite people to ask Dr. Wecht questions. And what the heck, let's throw it open. Could be about the JFK assassination, could be about, John Benet Ramsey case, if you'd like, whatever you want to ask Dr. Wecht about. Could be about his Air Force career. Just raise your hand, put it in the chat, or unmute yourself and speak up. Feel free. And on the Facebook side also, if anybody has comments that they want to send out, they'll just post the comment as a question, and Ellie will let us know here on the Zoom side the question you may have. You were coming of age in the era of the draft. You were probably going to end up in the military no matter what. What was it about the Air Force that you thought you might be a better?
Oh no, I didn't choose. In that program,
oh.
Yeah, it was named after a Colonel Berry who came up with the idea of why get everybody out of medical school and wind up with everybody as a general practitioner. Let them specialize and get them in as an ENT, a general surgeon, cardiovascular, dermatologist, obstetrician, what have you. So no, I didn't pick. They assigned. I'll tell you an interesting story. When they called after 1 year at my residency, and they were telling me they were going to call me up, and I said, where am I going to go? And they said Morocco, the air base over there. So I thought, oh my God, I was in law school, and I went, and I came up with some bullshit story. I said, hey, I'm Jewish, I can't go to an Arab country. And I don't know whether that meant anything or whether they were just nice. And I got that second year, and then I pled for the third year. But as I've said, they felt that 2 years was enough for me to serve as a pathologist, and they were right, and it worked out to my benefit in every single way. So sometimes you get that which you tried to avoid, and it works out to your advantage.
So as a pathologist in the Air Force, what kind of work were you doing exactly?
Well, I did autopsies.
Okay.
It was about a 400 bed hospital. It's a good sized hospital. And then we had autopsy materials sent to us from 27 air bases, including Ramey and Puerto Rico, and we would review those. There were two colleagues and me, and we worked under Colonel Robert Morrissey, a wonderful guy, just a wonderful, wonderful guy. We worked hard because we wanted to, and we did that. So we did all that work, and I even moonlighted with my colonel's permission on some pathologists in town in Montgomery, because there were two of them and they didn't talk to each other. They had a falling out, and when one went away, I would cover for them. So I did a little bit of work on the side. There wasn't much of that, but that was the work that I did. Pathology, and then the pathology of the hospital, and then pathology specimens sent to us from those air bases all over the country.
Got it. And your work sounds really fascinating, but then there's also this element to it that you mentioned of you're pursuing justice. You're pursuing justice for families that have been, suffered wrongly.
Yes.
And that has to be tremendously satisfying. So I want to ask you, can you, out of the 21,000 cases, 41,000 that you consulted on, are there a few, that stand out as maybe the most fascinating?
Well, not just because it was the case of the president shot and killed in the fourth largest city in America in broad daylight. Not only because of that, which would make it special by itself, but the forensics involved in that case are fascinating, and is still arguing back and forth about how many shooters and how many shots. And the Warren Commission report, the sine qua non is the single bullet theory. One bullet produced 7 wounds in 2 men. Came into Kennedy's back. First of all, it moved upward 11.5 degrees, having been fired from the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository building, moving upward 11.5 degrees, exiting, moving forward, leftward and downward, turns in midair, comes around, hits Connolly behind the right armpit, goes into his chest, perforates the right lung, destroys 4 inches of the right 5th rib, exits from his chest, comes down below nipple level. You can look at the Zapruder film, the most important piece of evidence in the case. He's holding the Texan Stetson hat here as he's looking to the crowd. The bullet is emerging below nipple level, moving downward. The bullet comes back up and around and into his wrist, shatters the distal end of the radius, one of the 2 long bones in the forearm, exits from his wrist, and then goes into the left thigh, and wasn't discovered until several hours later at Parkland Hospital, where they worked on the president and Governor Connolly. And even though they were operating on Connolly and everything, nobody happened to notice a bullet until the presidential entourage had left. And very fortuitously, the maintenance man at the hospital trying to get to the men's room found a corridor blocked by stretchers and moved the stretcher, and lo and behold, there was a bullet. Commission Exhibit 399, hero of the single bullet theory. 1 1/4 quarter, copper jacketed, lead core military ammunition, completely intact, slight crimping at the base. And the bullet is otherwise completely intact, having broken 2 bones in a 6'4" Texan like Connolly, and done all those magical vertical and horizontal gyrations. That is the single bullet theory, without which you cannot have a sole assassin. There were 2 shooters, one from the grassy knoll behind the picket fence, and one from behind. It may or may not have been Oswald. That's an interesting aspect, the case all by itself. But I'm not in this to exculpate Lee Harvey Oswald. I'm in it to show that there were 2 shooters. There was a conspiracy, and it wasn't the Russians, it wasn't the Chinese, and it wasn't the Cubans. As Pogo the Possum, the comic strip, said a long time ago, we have met the enemy, and he is us. It was us. And that's what this is all about. Can you let something like that go? No, I don't give a damn how long it takes. I won't be around. I used to be optimistic, but maybe one day the truth will emerge.
And I want to remind people that you said you presented your first paper on this in 1965.
February 65, American Academy of Forensic Sciences.
That's really early. Were there many people questioning the official?
Oh yeah, I found out later the FBI was in the audience. Hoover had sent them there to find out what I was going to say. I have testified 3 times under oath. I testified before the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I testified before the Rockefeller Commission, and I testified in federal court in Washington, D.C. when I was consulted by Jim Garrison, the DA in New Orleans, trying to get access to the autopsy materials. I was the first non-government sponsored, non-government related forensic pathologist given access to the autopsy materials. And that was in August of 72 when I went in and I discovered that the president's brain was missing. It had never been examined. It had been set aside in formalin, the fixative solution, for 2 weeks, which was proper to do. The pathologist went back 2 weeks later, and in the autopsy report, you'll see serial coronal sections as side to side of the brain are not made in order to preserve the specimen. Preserve the specimen for whom? For Jackie Kennedy's mantelpiece. You examine the goddamn brain. That's what it's about, because the formalin has fixed it. And now it's a hard-boiled egg that you slice like an egg on a salad, and you follow the trajectories of the bullets. And that's why the brain was never examined. And that's why its absence has never been accounted for. And there were other people who knew about this. It's not like, I discovered this. It was like, did Columbus discover America? No, my wife's Viking heritage, they were there centuries before Columbus, but it all depends on who speaks out first. So anyway, that's the story. It's terrible. It's disgusting the way this has been covered up. And I want you to know, this isn't just my opinion or conjecture. These are based upon neurological, neurosurgical, radiological, acoustical evidence. All kinds of experts have shown the acoustics evidence, for example, and the movement of the president's body when he struck, as you depicted on the Zapruder film, which I studied at Life magazine in 1966. You study that film at 1/18 second intervals. I don't know, some of you are old enough, some of you are, the spool of film, on the inside of the camera, not like today, and it moved around. And then each little frame is what you look at. They blew it up 11 by 15 inches and laid it out on X-ray view boxes, and you move in serpentine fashion, and you're studying the assassination of John Kennedy, the wounding of John Connally at 1/18 second intervals. There's not a word you can utter, a thought you can entertain, a movement you can make 18 times in 1 second. You can study this assassination. Kennedy is struck and the body goes backward from the impact of the bullet. And they've never explained that. They come out with some cockamamie theories, and it's nonsense. So anyway, that's quickly the single bullet theory and the Robert Kennedy theory. Let me toss this out. We know that the shooter, Sirhan, was indeed a shooter. No question about that. What was the distance? I'll ask all of you veterans, many of whom are quite familiar with guns and so on. You remember Robert Kennedy, he just won the California primary, which is tantamount to getting the presidential nomination on the Democratic ticket for president there in 1968. He's walking out from the back of the Ambassador Hotel. They can't take him out through the front because they'll never make it with that adoring crowd. And there's Sirhan, and Sirhan shoots at him. What was the distance of Sirhan's gun from Robert Kennedy? Just yell it out. Just yell it out in the range. Anyway, anybody.
Ken Kilmeyer, Jim Jameson.
3 feet.
3 feet.
What do you say, Jim? What do you say, Ken?
Yeah, 10 feet. Okay, you get these. Okay. The distance from which the fatal shot was fired was 1 to 1.5 inches. Confirmed by Dr. Noguchi, by 9 different forensic pathologists. I was just one of them, including 3 from the military, who confirmed with ballistic studies and so on. No question, that's never been disputed, okay? Also, the shot hit Kennedy behind the right ear with a slightly forward trajectory. Sirhan was in front. Remember, there's comes Bobby Kennedy, and there's Sirhan, and he steps and he shoots. And then the maitre d' of the hotel quickly knocked the gun out of his hand, and that was it. So first of all, there were about 13, 14 shots fired, and he only had an 8-shot gun. He sure as hell did not reload. Secondly, he was never behind the president and the senator. And number 3, he sure as hell was never 1 to 1.5 inches away with the muzzle of his gun. That's Robert F. Kennedy. Sounds crazy, huh? Just look it up. Check.
The photos looked like he was had a pistol right in his gut.
Pardon me?
The photos that I remember seeing years ago, it looked like the pistol was practically right in Kennedy's gut when Sirhan pulled the trigger.
Oh, no. Sirhan was in front of him.
Yeah, I know, but he was in front of him, but almost sticking it in his stomach when he pulled the trigger. That's what the picture.
No, you're thinking of, when you say in the stomach, you're thinking of Jack Ruby killing.
No. Oh, I thought
Lee Harvey Oswald. The shot that killed the senator was behind the right ear. Another shot in the upper shoulder area. There's no shot into the chest or abdomen. The shots are all fired from the.
I'm sorry.
From the rear. Yeah, no, I think you're a little mixed up. By the way, the Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby. That's another fascinating story too. Oh, these are just I testified. I was consulted by the DA in the Mary Jo Kopechne case too, and I was going to do the exhumation autopsy on her, but the judge had no basis because no charges had been filed. The family was vehemently opposed to it, and so Mary Jo Kopechne was never autopsied. and I did not do that autopsy. A couple other autopsies that I was going to do. I mentioned Jimmy Hoffa before. I was going to do a second autopsy on Yasser Arafat, the PLO leader, and they found out that I was Jewish, and that was canceled.
Don Nemchik, you had a question about Jackie Kennedy. Did Dr. Wecht ever speak with Jackie Kennedy about the assassination?
An interesting question. I was chairman of the Allegheny County Democratic Committee for several years, and we would invite a prominent Democrat in to speak at our major dinner fundraiser. And on this occasion, in 1979, I think it was, invited Senator Ted Kennedy. I picked him up at the airport, sat next to him, driving in from the airport in the limousine, and just he and I in the back. Sat next to him for 2.5, 3 hours at the dinner at the William Penn Hotel, drove back with him in the limousine. And I thought that if he was disturbed by my comments and talking about the missing brain and so on, that's all he had to say was, Cyril, could you knock it off or so on. And of course, he never said a word to me. His silence was golden. His silence. And at that time, I was very outspoken, had already testified in federal court, been consulted by Jim Garrison, and so on. He knew very well what I was saying, and he never said a word to me about, he said I wasn't going to bring it up with him. And I had been involved, as I've said too, in his brother's case in 1968. And so a total of 2.5, about a total of 4.5, 5 hours. And the senator never said a word to me about either case, which I had been criticizing for a long time. Don't you think he would have said something?
Ken Kazak, you had a question too for Dr. Wecht.
Dr. Wecht, big fan. If John Connolly, the bullet that John Connolly went to his grave with had been extracted.
Bullet fragments.
Bullet fragments. What would you have learned from that? What would we have learned from that?
We did. You're very sharp. You know about that. We tried to get those in. Attorney General Janet Reno agreed, and we asked Mrs. Connolly, and unfortunately, she said no. Even though John Connolly and his wife, now his widow, had stated repeatedly that they were certain that he had been struck by a different bullet. They stated that repeatedly. And there were fragments then in his wrist, which we wanted to get, and we would have tried to match those up and to have seen whether or not they could have been shown not to have come from that. There's no question they did not come from the magic bullet, but we wanted to have that proof. Regrettably, she denied it. Let me say that I talked about the trajectory of the bullet, and I talked about the condition of the bullet. I forgot one other thing, the weight of the bullet. In its pristine condition, it weighed 161 grains. 161 grains. As it was found underneath the stretcher, it weighed 158.6 grains. 2.4 grains is exactly 1.5% of the original weight of the bullet. And yet the fragments seen on x-rays and recovered. I talked to the head OR nurse, Audrey Bell, who got those fragments from the surgeons, gave them to the FBI. All those fragments together, we're told, weighed only 1.5% of the bullet. So take the weight of the bullet, the condition of the bullet, breaking 2 large bones, emerging near pristine, and with those vertical, horizontal changes of direction. And that is the single bullet theory. And that is, I repeat, for those of you who skip Latin, something without which something else cannot exist, the sine qua non. If you don't have the single bullet theory, you've got 2 shooters. And that's what it's all about. And then we open up the door. And that's why the door can't be open. It's not like saying, you, me, the next door neighbor, who gives a damn, 1 shooter, 2 shooters, or whatever. The moment you open up the door, the laws of every state and of the federal criminal justice system, that 2 or more people involved in a crime makes it a conspiracy. It can be involved before, during, after conspiracy. So you can't say, well, maybe a little bit of this and maybe a little bit of that. You either have a second person or you don't. The moment you open up the door for a second person, that's it. And remember, what the Warren Commission says, Lee Harvey Oswald, from beginning to end, nobody knew anything Nobody participated in any way. He did all of this by himself from beginning to end. And then enter Jack Ruby, mafioso from the age of 17 in Chicago. He's down there in Dallas. He's a restaurateur. He's a bar owner. He's a pimp. He's a hustler. He's a police informant. He's a gun smuggler into Cuba. Jack Ruby coming into the basement of the Texas firearm. I'm sorry, the Texas police station, and nobody even knew how he got in. And he said he was down there, by the way, sending money to a girl that used to work for him as a stripteaser. He was wiring her money at the Western Union. And when he finished, he was right across the street from the ramp into the basement of the Dallas Public Safety Building, having nothing else to do. He walked down the ramp. Nobody challenged him. Yeah, you or I could have walked in there too. And as he saw Oswald coming out, he said to himself, you know, I can't allow this bastard to go to trial. I can't allow Jackie Kennedy to be put through the emotional trauma of listening to this. And he pulls out his gun and he shoots Oswald, and that's it. And that's the Oswald Ruby story.
And all these years later, decades later, that's still an amazing story. And let me remind everybody, Dr. Wecht is 90 years old, and it's sad to see that you've lost your passion. It is just
just because, you know, really I know it's amazing, and I don't have to force it, but it just disturbs me so much as an American citizen, and along with you veterans and so on, you know, knowing what the country means and so on. It's just disturbing, and that it should be covered up in this fashion. And they got away with it. And
you know, I would say there's certainly no consensus over the Kennedy assassination, but one thing that everybody seems to agree on now was that the body was so mishandled. The autopsy was so mishandled.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you. This is the President of the United States. Multiple gunshot wounds. Do you know what kind of a headache that is for an experienced forensic pathologist when you get multiple gunshot wounds? And then when you get a second person who has been wounded like Conley, and you got to correlate the wounds in the one guy with the other, and you got to differentiate entrance from exit, and you got to correlate all of this. Do you know what a formidable task that is? So who did they call in to do this autopsy? Veterans, fellow Americans, you'll like this. Humes and Boswell, two hospital pathologists at Bethesda Naval Hospital in just outside DC, who had never done, listen to this, never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers. Is that disgusting? I guarantee you that you look it up. Any assassination of a king, a minister, a major figure in any country, including even totalitarian nations, they might cover it up in some way, but every one of those cases, Palme in Sweden and comes and all of them are done by the top forensic pathologists at the Medical Legal Institute in that respective country. In this country, what a disgrace, what an embarrassment, what a fraud. It's criminal what they did. Do you know what it's like to do an autopsy? Do you know what it was like to do my first gunshot wound autopsy? Do you know what it's like to do my first multiple gunshot wound autopsy? Do you know what it was like to correlate the wounds either with wounds in somebody else or matching them up with a bullet in the ceiling or found on the floor or something like that? That is a bitch. And you know, the foremost forensic pathologists around at that time, I was young, it wasn't me. They were packed. Milton Helper, the chief medical examiner in New York City, he was packed and ready to go. There was no question in his mind that he was going to be called. And he'd already called around to some colleagues and asked them to join him. Never called. So that is the Warren Commission report.
Ken Rizicki, you have a question in the chat. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it?
Pardon me?
Ken Rizicki. I'm asking Ken Rizicki if he wants to ask.
Oh.
Hey, Ken.
Yeah, Dr. Wecht, I was watching a TV program about the assassination, and they raised the possibility of the weapon that the Secret Service agent who was traveling in the car behind JFK They felt that that weapon was discharged, and he absolutely denies that it was. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's been studied, the angle, the trajectory, and so on. And it was something to be looked into, that a Secret Service agent accidentally shot from a car behind. And no, it's been ruled out. It's been ruled out. That did not happen. Thank you for asking that.
Good question. Any other questions here? I mean, that's certainly the case with the most at stake for the nation. But is there another case that?
Well, two other interesting cases that remain, in my opinion, unsolved, and they are unsolved, technically speaking, that I was deeply involved in. John Benet Ramsey. I've written a book on that. Look, Who Killed John Benet Ramsey? It's an excellent book. You'll enjoy it. And O.J. Simpson. Remember, O.J. Simpson was acquitted in a criminal trial, right? The civil trial was for damages. So technically, legally, formally speaking, that case has not been solved. I will tell you quickly my beliefs. John Benet Ramsey, there was no outside intruder. This was a game that the father was playing. Patsy Ramsey, former Miss West Virginia contestant, U.S. pageant, had stage 4 ovarian cancer. She was out of the sex business, and the little girl was a surrogate. Penile, no penile penetration, but digital, and chronic inflammation was found in the vaginal vault. Some foreign body material suggesting talcum powder. Get it all together. The cockamamie ransom note. We represent a small foreign faction, and nice round sum of $118,000 was the amount requested. $118,000. I can go on and on. Okay, that's John Benet Ramsey. No outside intruder. Never solved. And then O.J. Simpson. I know that O.J. was there. I was consultant in that case, and spent time with F. Lee Bailey, who recently died. I came to Pittsburgh and spent a couple of days talking with me and so on. There was a second person, and most likely was his son, Jason. You know, one person had 17 wounds, one person had 22 wounds. Do you know what happens in those kinds of wounds? Blood is all over the place. You don't get rid of that blood. They went to OJ's home just a few hours later. They tested every sink, toilet, shower, bathtub with highly sensitive chemical tests. No blood was found. You don't get rid of that blood. I recently scratched myself and blood in my wife's car, and I couldn't even believe. I thought I washed it off, and I mean, you just don't get rid of blood. That you've all had these kinds of minor superficial scratches. You could be in a lake at a seashore. You go in, you think it's going to wash away, and it doesn't. So there was definitely a second person there, and I believe this is conjecture. I believe that it was his son Jason, who did not like his stepmother, and went there. And Ron Goldman, that was quite unexpected, fortuitous, regrettably for Ron Goldman, returning Nicole Simpson's glasses from the restaurant where she had dined to her house. And it wasn't planned for him to be there. That was just something that was totally unexpected. But there's Ron Goldman. And so the altercation ensues, and I don't know the details, except that all those stab wounds, it was a wild, wild scene. You can be sure of that. So that's the story on a couple of other interesting cases that do not involve America in terms of who we are and where we're going, but are among the most fascinating cases. And when I give a talk or lecture program on my cases, those are the cases that are always brought up. And then, of course, there are others too. We don't have time to get into them. Well, I thank you all for your patience, and I'm sorry to have kept you so late. And Todd, I thank you for having invited me. It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be with fellow veterans. And I want to tell you that it was a tough 2 years. I bought a horse from a colonel who was leaving the base or retiring, and I rode my horse. And some days It was so rainy that I couldn't ride my horse. And sometimes when I got those weekend trips on the Goonie Bird, we called them, right? C-47s, the Goonie Birds, sitting on a goddamn metal, it had a little concave for your rear end, and you sat in that, and boy, that was not pleasant. So I had some gripes, but I never pursued them with the Department of Justice.
You did have it tough. So there were times you couldn't ride your horse because it was raining.
Yeah. And I didn't have a pillow on the Goonie Birds, right?
You didn't have a pillow on the Goonie Birds.
You think I have a valid complaint, or does the statute of limitations run?
It's good.
Right. Ladies, gentlemen, fellow veterans, and everybody, thank you so much for your patience. Pleasure being with you, and maybe we'll be with you again sometime. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
That was very enjoyable. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you all back Thursday night when we have Jim Nomad Lawrence on, the Marine pilot who served for over 30 years and then also served as a civilian doing spy missions over Kandahar, Afghanistan. We're going to be talking with him on a veteran story with Pete Mecca. Also check out the Scuttlebutt, the last issue of the Scuttlebutt, right, Sean? And
yes.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So for the good of the order, thank you very much, Dr. Wecht, and we'll see you all Thursday.